Okay, cycle 2, drawing, week 4. This one is going to be really fun, but it's a little bit complicated to explain, so this video might be a little bit longer. But the Foundations Guide wants us to expose the students to abstract art. So what this woman has done is she has taken some of the principles of design, and she has pulled out the principle of rhythm, and she has also associated it with the Fibonacci sequence, which, if you're not familiar with the Fibonacci sequence, we talked about it. You might have talked about it in practicum, but I know the kids, if they went to math camp, they did talk about it. And she kind of goes through and gives an explanation of what it is. It is the pattern in nature where the pattern is the sum of the two numbers before it. So 1 is the first number, and 1 plus 0 is 1. So the second number is 1. And then the third number is the sum of 1 plus 1, which is 2. And then the fourth number is the sum of 1 plus 2, which is 3. And then 2 plus 3 is 5. 3 plus 5 is 8, and so on and so on. And it gives us this beautiful pattern that is found in all kinds of places in nature. There's also a set of calculations comparing the numbers in this sequence that give us the number 1.6180339, and it's called phi. I think it's PHI. But this is what she gives you, kind of an explanation of how it is, how the number is calculated, what the ratio is. And then she gives an example of how it is seen in plants, which that aloe plant is just beautiful. But when we look at art and how mathematics helps us to quantify or to put in order what we see that is beautiful, and we see these patterns over and over again, it really speaks to the order of our Creator and how much God appreciates beauty and design and rhythm. And so that's kind of what this lesson is intended to communicate. The approximation of this ratio is called the rule of thirds. And it says that to find the most natural focal point, you divide a picture into thirds, and then you place the center of the interest at the intersection of a horizontal and a vertical 1/3 line, or place the horizon at one of the two horizontal 1/3 lines. So she gives you some examples in here of what that looks like. Like drawing your attention to this picture without the grid, the focal point is kind of like right here in the center of the flower. And so if you look at the boxes, that's where they have placed the focal point, is right here at this point. Here, this beautiful horizon picture, the focal point is at the bottom 1/3 line. So when this is, when this picture is divided into a grid of thirds, then the horizon line matches up with one of those horizon lines. And it's just what is most appealing to our eyes when we look at it. Let's see. Many famous artists have used the golden ratio as a guide in composing their art and music, and we don't always know if they did it intuitively or if they knew ahead of time and they made it follow that pattern. But artists have known since Egyptian times that it is the most eye-pleasing, proportionate way to present art, architecture, anything that you're looking at that's pleasing to your eye. So there's many things that include the Fibonacci number sequence. There are pictures in nature. So we've got a pine cone and a seashell and a tornado. Tornado or hurricane? It doesn't say. Maybe a hurricane because it's over water. Here's some more examples. Seeds in a sunflower. This is the picture that we looked at earlier. Here's the Greek Parthenon, which I wouldn't have thought about this being a Fibonacci number, but if you look at the grid that's overlaid, see if I can get a little bit closer so you can see it better. You can see the 1 square, the 3 square, the 5 square, the 8 square. And I'll show you a picture of this grid that'll be a little bit more clearer to you too. Oh, whoops, my book upside down. The Greek Parthenon here is the Mona Lisa overlaid with the Fibonacci grid. You can see those rules of thirds that make it a very proportionally eye-pleasing picture. This is another one. This is a picture of a wave. You can see the full Fibonacci spiral there in that picture. So she just goes on and on. There's several different pictures in here. This one is very interesting where the focal point was the eye of this subject that was being painted. She gives an example of abstract art using the rule of thirds. So picture after picture after picture that are in here. And again, this would be another week that would be fine for you to bring your iPad. If you don't want to print these out, you'll have access to the soft copy. So that will be just fine. Or if you want to print them out, you certainly may do so. The project that we want to do and the way that we're going to kind of bring abstract art into this is that abstract art is defined as art that does not try to represent visual reality. And the idea of abstract art helps us to really understand that we can choose to create art that matches what we see, or we can choose to create art that does not match what we see. And often the artist can best achieve his or her purpose by creating art that differs from reality. So there are lots and lots of different types of abstract art. Geometric patterns are considered to be abstract art. Figurative art represents an idea or a feeling, but it's not necessarily representing actual reality. So stylized figures or like, what's it called? I can't remember what it's called. Like pop art kind of. And then the drawing basic is rhythm. And especially with the Fibonacci sequence, it illustrates it really well. But you can see repetition and pattern in lines and shapes. And it occurs both in the natural world, what God created, and then what man has created, because we created in the image of God think the same things are beautiful. In the art world, we call the effect of repetition and pattern rhythm. So rhythm is one of the 7 principles of design, and it should be one of those cardstock mini design posters. I think it was week 2. Yes, here it is. So rhythm is one of our principles of design. We talked about balance when we did the line of symmetry. This week we're going to talk about rhythm. You can use pattern, repetition, and movement to add rhythm to your drawings. And then she goes through the vocabulary, some of the things that we talked about, the rule of thirds, the Fibonacci sequence, repetition, pattern, movement, that kinds of things. All of this introduction that we do every week is entirely up to you how much you convey to your students and to their parents. It really just kind of depends on what the ages of your kiddos are and how much reception they have for hearing what it is that you're going to say. The project for this one is really fun, and there's a couple of different ones. She's broken it out into several different levels, just like always, but there's 2 basic kinds of projects. So for the least experienced, she's saying take one Fibonacci spiral. So I have several copies of these in your folders, but she says take one of these and have the parents help the children cut and paste the squares onto paper. So you just want them to cut out the squares, each individual blue square, and then they're going to glue it onto paper. I've got white cardstock. You guys will have a whole slew of different, I just put a sheet of a bunch of different colors of cardstock in here. And you don't have to, you can even cut the cardstock in half. You can even let them trace the different sizes of the squares once they've cut them out on different colors of cardstock if they want. This will all be in your tutor basket or tub or whatever. So once they cut the squares out and decide if they're going to put white squares on white paper and draw them, or if they're going to cut out different colored squares or put white squares on colored paper, whatever, they can do that. And a sample project that was kind of fun to see, she's got it in here for the kids that did this particular thing, was they glued their squares, and this person drew pattern and different color on their squares on their piece of paper. This person used their squares almost kind of like tangrams and made a picture and then illustrated it around. Either one is totally fine, whatever the kids would like to do. Remember, we are abstract arting it this week, so it doesn't have to be a particular thing. It doesn't, they can play with it and have fun with it. So that would be a good level 1 for those youngest kids, cutting out those squares. Level 2, have the students follow the instructions as written. So in the written instructions, it says cut out the blue squares and then arranging them on colored cardstock to make abstract art, like the one that I showed you with the rule of thirds, the block pieces. So if a student wants to do this, they may need more than one copy of the Fibonacci spiral. They may need to make, 2 or 3. They may need to have 2 or 3 of the same size squares. So that is totally fine. They can do that, cut out their squares and arrange them, maybe use a black Sharpie or marker and, outline all of their squares, or use a different color to outline them. That's fine too. Level 3 is to have the students draw their own Fibonacci spiral on graph paper. So this is kind of fun too. There's instructions in here that tell you how to, except I did not put them in here. Oh yeah, here they are. Okay. So there's instructions in here on how to draw the Fibonacci spiral. And you guys will all have graph paper in your tutor boxes, so you can pass out graph paper to any of the students that would like to do that. But basically, it's showing you how to start with 1, 2, your 3 square, how to make it bigger, and so on until you get the whole paper filled in a Fibonacci spiral. And then once they've done it, they can, color it or color the outlines or whatever. Level 4, this would be for the oldest kids. Challenge the students to see if they can figure out how to draw the squares and spiral looking at the template, but be prepared to help them if they get frustrated. So the template that they're talking about is not the how to draw, but it's the actual this. This is really hard. I actually tried it, and I can't do it. I had to use the graph paper. But I also have really bad spatial awareness. I have no idea if something's close or far away. So this actually would be a really good exercise for me to do at home to practice getting better at that spatial and proportional recognition. So that would be level 4. And then at home, suggest they do it again at home. Draw some fun designs using a Fibonacci sequence. See if they can find things where they notice the Fibonacci spiral or the rule of thirds. Look for examples of the golden ratio or angle in nature, and then sketch it in a nature journal. So any of those things would be things that they could do at home to take this just one step further. Keep in mind always that every single week, the goal is not to finish a task. The goal is to expose the students to a different method or a different technique and to give them practice with it. The aim is that they will take it home and work on developing those techniques so that their skill keeps increasing over time. But help the kids remember maybe at the very beginning that it's not so important that they finish, because they definitely will be able to finish at home. But what's really important is that they practice the technique. So that is drawing week 4.